The Dialed In Angling podcast presented by Onyx Fish and Runnings. It's hard to believe that we're at the end of October. I know if you tune into this podcast each and every week, we've been talking about how special October is, how special fall fishing is. For me, I've always dreamt of an October that would last 2 or 3 months, and we've talked about it extensively. There's so much to do this time of year, from hunting to fishing, different experiences all over the state. You know, if you've been following the podcast, you know I've been pan fishing, I've been pike fishing, I've been walleye fishing, I've been guiding, I've been hunting, I've been grouse hunting, pheasant hunting. I plan on doing some bow hunting this weekend, trying to pack it all in. Including that, you've got honey-do lists to do at home. You've got things you need to get done, including the dreaded winterizing your boat. You know, for me, it's always bittersweet. It's one of those things that you can check off your box and get it done. I'm the type of person that likes to get things done, and I love checking those boxes off, but it's always bittersweet to have your boat winterized, because that means it's over, right? It's sort of like the Santa Claus float at the Macy's Day Parade. That's it, man. We're done with Thanksgiving, on to Christmas. That's how winterizing your boat is. That's the feeling I get. It's great because you can sit in your deer stand knowing it's done, but it's a bummer. Right now, I'm at Rapid Marie doing that exact thing, winterizing my boat for the season. I'm sitting here with Brian and Andrew in the service department. I know you guys have been knee deep with people coming in since Labor Day. But as Brian and I were talking off air, you know, we've had warm falls over the last few years, and it seems like people are fishing longer and longer and longer. I'm sure, you know, you get this big rush in the spring and you get this big rush in the fall, but with it being so warm, I've seen a ton of people on the lake this year, whereas in the past, it seemed like once you got past Labor Day, the cruiser boats were done, the jet skis were gone. I saw people skiing like a couple weeks ago. I've seen jet skis on the lake. It's just been so weird because we've had these warm temps.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks here, you know, have cooled down a little bit, but prior to that, the very beginning of October, you know, we had 80 plus degrees, and people were still out enjoying their boat, and that's a good thing. But yeah, at some point, it's Minnesota. Our weather's going to change, and you know, you got to take care of your boat too.
Yeah, you know, as I was driving here, it was 21 degrees in the morning. And so, you know, that gets me thinking about things in my boat, you know, even traveling down the road. You know, I drain the water out of there. I do everything. Obviously, I bring it to you guys, the experts, to get things done. What are some things people can do to kind of safeguard their boat until they get it winterized? You know, because I know in the past, I've had issues where, you know, I was still guiding up until deer season, and I remembered I had a little bit of water in my live well, and it screwed up one of the valves I had at one point. And, you know, it's things you don't even think about.
Right. Yeah. If you're using your boat in the fall and you get those cool temperatures at night, you definitely need to take care of your live wells. That little RV antifreeze, a little pink antifreeze jug, always keep one in the truck. Dump a little bit in there, run your pumps on recirculate. Depending on your boat live well system, just run a little bit through that. Run through the drains, so nothing's going to freeze up on you overnight.
Yeah, I mean, that's good advice. I've had everything happen in the fall, where even to the point where I went to go launch my boat and my bunks were stuck to my boat. I couldn't get my boat off the trailer. I had to like wait, and I actually was sitting there kind of scratching my head like, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, the trailer dropped. And I was like instantly like relieved.
It'll thaw a little bit once you put it in the water.
Yep. I remember, you know, when Lund had the electronic compartments that slide in and out, right? That would retract.
Yep.
I was fishing the day before. We were having a great time. It was like 70 degrees, but you know, you're fishing minnows and they're spilling all over the floor. That contractible electronics compartment actually froze on me. I couldn't get my electronics out in the morning because it was 19 degrees. Things you don't think about. So I went into the hotel room in Grand Rapids. I had some customers staying there. We were picking them up. It was like a big group trip. I got some hot water and like from like the coffee pot, you know, where they have the hot water valve.
Yep.
And I actually got that thing to slide out. It's just things you don't think about this time of year.
Yeah, little silicone spray on the bunks, you know, makes them slick, but it also keeps them from freezing too.
Oh, absolutely. Now, if people are looking to bring their boat here to Rapid, to get it winterized, to get it ready, you know, are there some things that you tell them to take out of the boat, or things to prep? I mean, what are like just the absolute, you have to do in the fall, things to do to get your boat ready?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just, if you're not going to do your oil change in the fall, just at least be checking your gear lube and everything, making sure there's not water in there. But we highly recommend just doing that gear lube and oil change in the fall, just to have a peace of mind. You can turnkey in the spring and be ready to go.
Keeping your batteries charged up too before you put it away. Have them full, and then a lot of people are running onboard chargers. Just leave it plugged in if you have that opportunity to leave it plugged in over the winter. Even if it's in cold storage, leave it plugged in. It's going to keep those batteries from freezing.
Tend them all winter.
Batteries are one thing that have gotten, well, everything's gotten expensive, right? But batteries are one thing that you can overlook for a winter, and really you can rack up that bill pretty quickly. I know in the past, like I remember a few years ago, I had what I called battery Armageddon in the spring. I usually have trickle chargers and different things, but it was like my son's boat battery, the pontoon battery, the lawnmower battery, like they all went bad at the same time. And some of it was just that the shelf life of that battery had already hit its mark. But it was also a couple of them where I got busy in the fall. I got busy deer hunting, and all of a sudden, I just forgot about putting the charger on there or whatever it was. And it cost me a lot of money that spring.
For sure.
So, making sure that you have those batteries charged up is one thing. And like you said, just plugging it in, that battery, that trickle charge will stay on there. I know if you don't have an onboard charger, they sell those little
you can buy chargers. a little battery tender maintainer, NOCO battery tender. There's all kinds of them out there. Just a single bank, you just clip it on, leave it there for the winter. It ensures that you're going to have a good battery in the spring.
Sure. And if you're unsure of what to do, I highly recommend bringing your boat into a place like Rapid Marine. You guys winterize thousands of boats, right? You've done it for years. You know what to do. You look at every boat is different in the sense of, making sure all the water's out of there, batteries are charged. The gear lube is a thing that I think a lot of people overlook that can cost you a fortune. And it's time on the water. Like in Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, South Dakota, we only have a certain window that we can take advantage of being on the water. And in the spring, you don't want to encounter these issues, because you're going to get, just like in the fall where you're taking advantage of these really nice warm days, nothing worse in the spring when the lakes go out and you go to grab your boat and the batteries are dead, or you didn't check the gear lube, the gas wasn't, you're just having issues. And, nothing worse than experiencing that.
Winterizing in the fall is going to eliminate a lot of those issues in the spring. With our winterization, we do more than just an oil change and a gear lube change. We're also checking all the switches in your boat. We do load test batteries. We check your trailer bearings. We grease all the zerks on the motor and the trailer. It's a full service, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, great idea to do. It's just peace of mind, and it's one of those boxes you can check off in the fall. Put the boat away so it's ready to go in the spring. What are some other things, as we get towards the next few weeks here? Because I know we just had MEA. That's a big one for people that went out fishing, taking advantage of taking kids out fishing. I know even this weekend, if people are really diehard anglers, surface temperatures are still pretty warm. And it looks like we're going to have an excellent warm, weekend ahead of us. But as you look towards next week, there's a lot of days that are below freezing. I know for me, when I pull my boat in the fall, the first thing I check is that live well, but then also draining your motor.
Vertically trim that motor, trim it all the way down so that water drains. Every motor is self-draining, but you can still even tip it up partway a little bit after it's been draining, drain it, tip it back down. You're going to see a little bit of water still come out of those passageways down by the propellers. So even a couple times up and down is going to help. So,
and I know batteries are a thing in the fall too. As soon as it gets cold, battery life in general. What are you seeing with different types of batteries? There's just the regular lead acid batteries. Now you've got a ton of people using lithiums. You got AGM style batteries. Are you noticing anything in the fall or in the spring again, if people aren't charging them, or are you having issues with any sort of lithium battery? What are you guys seeing as techs? Because you see everything as people walk through the door.
Yeah, the biggest thing is just keeping them charged over the winter. If you have access to a plug-in, just leave it plugged in, whether it's AGM, flooded, or lithium. All those battery chargers are also battery tenders, so just leave them plugged in and walk away. But if you don't have that option in your storage, I would recommend taking your batteries out, leaving them in the basement, something like that, if it's in cold storage.
Perfect. The other thing that I tell people to do too is if they're looking to upgrade electronics, if they're looking to upgrade poles for their forward-facing sonar, if they want to add a forward-facing sonar unit, maybe they want to change their battery systems. Now's the time to do it. Like, do it when you bring it in to have it winterized in the fall, or do it in the winter, because I know in the spring you guys get this mad rush in the spring that's way worse than fall even.
Right.
And I've been in here in the spring. It felt like we just did a podcast. Summer went by that quickly, but you come in here in the spring, the telephones are ringing off the hook. People are coming. They want their boats now. They want to take advantage of it.
It's go time.
Yeah, good time now. If you do want to upgrade, it's a little more relaxed. You're not as rushed either, and you can think through things and pick out what you want.
Yeah, I know, because I field a ton of calls and messages, Facebook messages, whatever, on Instagram messages, where people are looking to upgrade electronics. They're getting more comfortable forward-facing sonar units. Some people might have started with an ice bundle, but now they're like, hey, you know what? I'm ready to put a unit on my boat, put a pole, and just get it set up the way I want to. And now is definitely time to do it. Do it in the fall so that in the spring you're ready to roll. Let's get away from the boat winterization talk, because I know Brian's heading up to the Rainy River.
For sure.
You and I have talked, and obviously the listeners, if you've tuned into the podcast, I'm a huge Rainy River fan. I've been last week I talked extensively about sort of my fall bucket list, things I still want to accomplish, even though it's towards the end of October here. And the fall Rainy River run is one of them. I think that's another one that in the spring, there's thousands and thousands of people, where you get up in the fall and there's people, but nothing like the spring.
The colder temperatures keep them away, but you don't have that mad rush of, it's springtime, I got to catch a fish. But for me, it's fall jigging up on Lake of the Woods. I have to do it. So I'm going.
And the reason that it's such good fishing is because you have this run of emerald shiners in the river, right?
For sure.
And so when those river shiners come in, it's game on. Now it'll be interesting this year. The water's really low.
Yep.
So river fishing will be interesting. I'll definitely be curious to see how you guys do up there.
It's curious if that shiner run is a big push into the river, or if they're going to hang up out on the lakeside and just hang out there without all that water flow pushing them into the river.
Well, and I've heard reports of people already catching them in the river, even though the shiner run hadn't started. Those fish had already started feeding. They're putting their feed bag.
Yep, a natural movement for them. They do it no matter what.
Yeah, I have a few buddies that are talking about going up to the Rainy this weekend. Obviously Target Walleye was talking last week about doing some fishing up there. I've got to get up there. It's one of those things in the fall, but now as I'm talking about winterizing my boat, it's like regret time here.
For sure. Everybody has that.
It's total FOMO. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Fishing FOMO is what it equates out to. Me personally, I know I've got plans to go out and fish with Marcus. I've talked about it all season on this podcast. Marcus Quam, who is a regular contributor to Dialed in Angling, talks a lot about this. At least privately, he doesn't do a ton of guiding, but he talks privately to me about these giant walleyes that he catches out there on the river. And I've never experienced fishing on the river out there in the fall. Done a little bit in the spring just to kind of scratch that itch. I've done a little bit out there. Obviously fished around the South Dakota Glacial Lakes area extensively, summer and winter, but I've never gone out there. And he's talking like late October into November. And so, I think firearms deer season is going to take a little bit of a backseat. The last few years, I've literally been a guide for my kids, and I sit out there. I do love deer hunting, and I love deer camp. I love everything about the firearms season. But I think for me personally, that the firearms season is going to take a little bit of a backseat, just because I do want to get out the river and experience those 10, 11, 12, 14-pound walleyes.
Yeah, those are massive fish to not take a chance at,
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm jealous of Brian going up to the Rainy, because you have potentials to catch those fish. This summer on Lake of the Woods, it was so epic, that bite. If you followed any of the tournaments that happened out there, even my friends that went up there that were fishing forward-facing sonar, that whole South Shore had so many fish on it and so many big fish. I mean, like Pat McSherry and those guys, I remember talking to them after the tournament. And even Steven, like, man, you guys had an unbelievable bag, like 57 pounds, something crazy. And they're like, yeah, it's like first 2 fish, they had 31 and a half, 30. Like if you're not putting a bag together of 29s and above, you're sort of missing, at least that top 5, maybe even the top 10.
Right.
And so that speaks volumes for that fishery. Definitely still on that hit list. I've been able to scratch the itch in a lot of areas as far as, everything I want to do with panfish, everything I wanted to do with pike. I've been on this crazy good pike bite. Of course, walleye fishing with customers, caught a ton of smallmouth bass. So if I could get the river out in South Dakota accomplished yet this fall and maybe sneak up to the Rainy River here before that's over or before ice up.
Ice up is the biggest thing. We fished one time and it was December 15th and I had the best day I ever had on the river, but it was cold.
I bet. Yeah. Right. And it's always way colder on the water than it is on the ice. I've had some crazy, nasty cold days on the ice guiding that were pale in comparison to those days on the open water where you're absolutely freezing.
Yeah. Prepping for this trip and I'm like, oh man, I got to break out the ice gear. A week ago we were in t-shirts.
I learned my lesson guiding a couple weeks ago. We've had this roller coaster ride of weather, and I had a few of those mornings where I got up in the morning and it was 34 degrees and all I had was my Rapala rain gear on. I didn't have the Strike Master suit on, froze my tail off and didn't have gloves, didn't have a hat, and was like, well, hey, dummy, you're going to learn really quickly that you need to prepare. So ever since that point, even though it's been in the 80s a lot of days, that Strike Master suit doesn't leave the back of my pickup truck. I leave that in there purposely for those days.
Those Lunds have a lot of compartment room.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
You can always store them away.
Well, and this time of year too, even though the forecast says, it's going to be 60 today or 70, inevitably, when you get out there in the morning, it's going to be like this, in the 20s, 30s, 40s at the most. And you add the wind and that damp air like we talked about, you need to have that gear and you need to have it in the boat. So, well, hey, guys, I'm going to let you get back to work. I know the phones are ringing here at Rapid Marine. Brian wants to get as much done as possible and then pass it off to Andrew so he can get up to the Rainy River. Hey, thanks a lot, you guys. I highly encourage any of our listeners, if you haven't winterized your boat yet, you need to start really thinking about it and get it to these guys. If you've got some rigging issues or you want to add some things to your boat, these guys are experts. Rapid Marine, all of their dealerships, I've got awesome guys that are not only rigging the boats, but are sitting at the desk knowing exactly what to do with your boat in every situation because they've seen everything. So thanks again, guys. Hey, stay tuned. We got more Dialed In Angling coming your way. OnX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Quickly filter lakes by species, then select trophy potential, high abundance, keeper potential, or high stocking effort to find the fish you are after in the size and the numbers you are trying to catch. Download from the App Store today to get research tools for the serious anglers and beginners alike, giving you the data to target the right lakes and the confidence to get there. Use tools like recent imagery, fishing hotspot data, or the best-in-class weather features that call out current wind, weather, barometer, moon phase, majors and minors, along with precip and more. OnX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you'd never known existed. Download OnX Fish Midwest today, the app that is changing the game on ice and open water.
Runnings Home, Farm, and Outdoor stores are celebrating 78 years, serving 90 local communities across the Upper Midwest, the Northeast, and America's Heartland. Runnings has everything you and your family need for your home, on the farm, and in the outdoors. Lawn and garden, hardware, farm and ranch supplies, sporting goods, housewares, snacks, and everything for your pets. Go to runnings.com to find one of the 90 locations near you, or shop online anytime at runnings.com. Runnings, your home, farm, and outdoor store.
Okay, for the next segment of this podcast, I want to talk about some more fishing reports. I know I got in depth last week about all sorts of different bites. that are at their peak. Surface temperature dropping quickly. We're seeing a lot of surface temps kind of in that lower 50s now, where as even a week ago, there was surface temps around 60. And so that gives you a perspective how cold it's been at night. And even during the daytime, it's not until the afternoon that the sun is at its peak and at its most powerful point. So, these lakes are cooling down very quickly. I want to talk a little bit about turnover, because as we get to that 50-degree mark, turnover is going to occur pretty quickly on a lot of lakes. And now turnover doesn't occur on all lakes, but it occurs sometimes, especially on lakes that are real stratified throughout the summer. And this year has been a really hot summer, even though, probably a historic scale, I wouldn't say it's like over the top hot, but it just seemed like surface temperatures remained pretty warm all year on all sorts of different lakes I was on. And so you're going to see this real quick turnover happen. And when that happens, a lot of times it'll turn that bite off for a few days, and what turnover is basically the water that's down below rises up because it's warm air, warm water rises, and then that cooler surface water starts to drop. You can really tell if you get to the lake and all of a sudden you're seeing this gunk or this algae or things on the shoreline that you're really not used to seeing in that particular body of water. And like I said, it doesn't occur all over. Mille Lacs Lake, for example, doesn't have a lot of stratification. You get a little bit of turnover, especially if you've got a quick drop in surface temperatures like we're seeing now, but you're not going to have this real hard turnover where, oxygen levels change in different layers of the water and that. But you do see it on a lot of lakes where it's really deep or parts of the lake. Leech Lake is one of those examples where you might have a harder turnover because of Walker Bay, right? It's really deep, it's stratified different water, but you get in other parts of the lake, there's virtually no turnover at all because it remains shallow, that sort of thing. So you can have turnover in some parts of some lakes and not have it in others. And then, of course, some lakes have it really hard turnover and others don't. And so that usually dictates where these fish are at. It generally messes up the fishing for a little bit. The fish seem to get used to it after a couple of days. But I think it's going to impact some of these lakes as we get into this weekend, especially with the nighttime lows that we're having. You might see turnover. So if you get to a lake and they're just not biting, or if you get to a landing and it looks like that lake turned over, you might want to try looking elsewhere, at least for this weekend. It seems like once you get past about a week of turnover, they're used to it. The fish kind of position into where they're going to be. And then boom, everything's back to normal again. Some of these lakes, you start to see crappies, for example, that were up in the shallows. All of a sudden turnover occurs. They start to slide out into these wintering basins pretty quickly, and they get deep really fast. I've seen it with walleyes too, where they move off the weed lines and they get deep really fast. So that's a good indicator that lakes are turning over. I get asked a lot, is the lake turned over? Is the lake turned over? Usually it happens a lot sooner than we're seeing now. I mean, right now, surface temps are around 50 degrees, maybe 51, 52, depending on where you're fishing, obviously, towards the Twin Cities and the southern part of the state. It's going to be a little warmer than what we're seeing, like north central Minnesota, where I'm located, into Brainerd, Aiken. And of course, it's a little bit cooler as you get up north of Grand Rapids, as you get up north of, let's say, Leech, Winnie, Cass, that sort of thing. Again, turnover doesn't happen everywhere, but just be aware of it. I wanted to mention it and talk about it a little bit because I get asked all the time, are the lakes turning over? That's usually a common thing in the fall. People want to know, and you can plan your fishing trips accordingly. Mille Lacs is a good destination if you're worried about turnover on the lake that you're going to. If you're around Brainerd or that area and your lake turned over, or you went up to the cabin to shut it down and the lake turned over, you want to do some fishing, Mille Lacs Lake is a great destination to get out to and not have to worry about any sort of turnover. Since we're on Mille Lacs Lake topic, I was out there this week as well. Again, snap jigging plastics. Mille Lacs is now just getting to that prime surface temperature, 51, 52, 53, 54 degrees. Might have cooled off a little bit overnight here. We had some really cool nighttime lows, but it's prime. If you want to experience Mille Lacs fishing, not just for walleyes, smallmouth bass, but muskies, it's really good right now. It's really heating up. It's unfortunate that the best bite is occurring, kind of towards this Halloween time period, because I like to see this prime bite or this peak period generally start, right in that first part of October. And not that it was a bad bite. I had great fishing on Mille Lacs. Obviously, following this podcast, I caught walleyes and pike and smallmouth bass out there. But, for a lot of people after MEA, that's it. They're winterizing their boats, just like we were talking to Brian and Andrew about earlier in the podcast, and they're done. So they may not get to experience that peak bite. Same thing with Leech and Winnie right now. They're on fire. I was up on Winnie again this week. Absolutely incredible bite. Snapping plastics. I did notice up there it went from that fluke style tail, that jerk tail, that minnow tail, going back to paddle tails. And so as these surface temperatures drop, they're going to want a bait that falls a little bit slower. And it's that rise fall of that paddle tail, a little less aggressive. It falls slower in the water column, even jigs and minnows. It's been really hard to find bait this week, out fishing, moving around from bait shop to bait shop. There's a lot of bait shops that are either closed for the season, or they only have fatheads, or, their bait dealers are slowing down. That's a real common theme. So regardless if you're going to Mille Lacs, to the Grand Rapids area, up towards Winnie, Leech, Cass, make sure you're calling ahead and figuring out your bait situation before you're getting there, because you don't want to get to a bait shop and find out that they're closed or they don't open until 10 o'clock or, something like that, and you're out of bait. Because as we get towards, this later fall period, especially walleye fishing, you're going to want to have a little bait with you. I didn't need it this week. I was still rocking the plastics. I was doing great on the Crush City Mayors. I was still doing great on the Crush City Jerks. And then, of course, the Largo shads. If you've never fished the Storm Largo shad, that's a great bait to use in the fall. I love using plastics when I don't have to deal with live bait, especially when it's cold out. Man, I do it as long as I possibly can, but the fish will sometimes dictate how you should be fishing. I know a lot of people love fishing chubs this time of year, rigging big chubs, creek chubs, red tails, big rainbows even. Super good way to catch fish, super effective and really fun. I love rigging chubs this time of year. As we're approaching the end of October and as we get closer to Halloween, you're really going to have to call around and figure out where you're going to find those chubs, because a lot of places either don't have them or they're sold out, or they're just, throwing their hands up for the season. A lot of people don't want to bring in a lot of bait this time of year because they don't want to be stuck with it as we get into a month and a half of them not selling bait. I'm with them. I understand why they do it. They don't want to get stuck with a bunch of bait that they got to hang on to, or is going to die in their tanks and they're not going to make money on. These bait shops are obviously in the business to make money, and they don't want to get stuck with those sort of things. So I completely understand. I love using chubs. A good alternative this time of year, though, is some small sucker minnows. They love feeding on sucker minnows as well. So if you are walleye fishing, if you can't get creek chubs, try some smaller sucker minnows, some pike minnows. They work great on a rig. Maybe not as hardy as a chub, not my preferred bait over a chub, but they definitely will get the job done. And really, as the surface temperatures start to fall, there's a lot of times where I'll go with a little bit smaller minnow. So even if you're rigging live bait minnows for walleyes, instead of fishing those great big chubs or red tails, you can downsize to a rainbow minnow and nostril hooking those minnows so they stay alive with a smaller hook. Let's say like a number 4 hook, a number 6 hook, even like an octopus hook, and then running a 4, 6, 8 foot leader with lighter pound test. I found that sometimes more effective than the bigger chubs. It's sort of been a secret of mine, but I remember fishing with my Uncle Gary. He was out fishing, guiding on a lake around Brainerd. And I had these really beautiful red tails and chubs. And I was, super pumped because I came off of a lake where it was a phenomenal rigging chub bite, and I was pounding them. And I had this beautiful bait that I was saving for this guide trip that we were doing. And I went out there and I wasn't catching that many. And my Uncle Gary was pounding them. And lo and behold, I talked to Gary. I said, what were you using? And he said, rainbows. And I said, oh man, you must have got some really big rainbows. He said, no, actually, I just had some normal size rainbows and I just put a smaller hook on, a little bit lighter pound test, and that's what they wanted. And lo and behold, I mean, that was eating me alive. So the next day or 2 days later, I remember going out to that lake, and it's right in the Brainerd area. I went back out to that lake. I downsized my leader to a 4-pound test leader. I used a number 6 hook, and I started using smaller minnows like the rainbows, the bigger rainbows, and I caught a ton of walleyes. And right then, it was like a light bulb moment that you can't get fixated on the way you want to fish. You got to fish what the fish want. And I was always in the camp that, big chubs, you needed the minnows. They had to be alive. You had to have big red tails, big chubs. And I know a lot of anglers fall into that category where they're like, they go from bait shop to bait shop and they're looking for like the perfect either creek chub or red tail, when lo and behold, they might hit just fine on rainbow minnows. On that same breath, that can happen when you're jigging. As live bait anglers, as you're fishing for walleyes, you say, well, we need to get shiner minnows. You have to have shiners. They only bite shiners. I found, a lot of times when you get like a river mix where you have a mix of minnows in there, you've got some rainbows, you got some shiner minnows, you've got some chubs, you've got some fatheads, you've got some weird little grass shiners or whatever they are. It's amazing where, sometimes that smaller minnow works better than the larger minnow. And a lot of times they key in on a certain size. I know, some of those grass shiners or even bigger fatheads or, medium-sized rainbows work better than the shiners sometimes. And so not getting into that trap that you always just need shiners, because that's not the case. And I take countless customers out fishing that I start snap jigging plastics and they don't believe in it because they're hardcore live bait fishermen. And they're like, they don't feel confident or they don't feel comfortable fishing a plastic. And they watch me put on a clinic, especially with these Crush City baits. And they become a believer really quickly. And, I've even had gentlemen in my boat the last week and a half here that a little bit older anglers probably, they're used to fishing in the fall with a jig and a minnow. They wanted shiners, which was fine. I had those in the boat, but they saw me put on a clinic with plastics and they quickly switched over and fell in love with it. And it is a fun technique when you're snap jigging plastics and catching them, whether it's on paddle tails, whether it's on jerk shads. It's addicting. It's sort of that rhythm bite, and the walleyes aren't just biting it, and they're not just grabbing the minnow and you're missing fish. They're inhaling it. It's down their throat. I mean, they want that bait. It's more of a reactionary strike. It's super fun. And I mean, even just the last few weeks, like I said, I've had customers that texted me, emailed me after our trip and was like, that was amazing. You taught this old dog a new trick. I was the same way. I was a hardcore live bait fisherman, hardcore rigging in the fall, jigging minnow. That was it. I converted a long time ago and I love it. I love fishing different ways. I love fishing jigging wraps. I love fishing hair jigs. I love fishing plastics, jerk baits for walleyes, lots of different techniques that you can put them in the boat and have fun doing it. I love experimenting like that. You still have this weekend to do it. I know we're running out of time. We talked about winterizing boats on this podcast. Quickly, I'm going to start shifting to talking about ice fishing and ice gear. There's a lot of new ice product coming out. There's an ice show in the Twin Cities this weekend. I've been seeing the advertisement for it. I know just being down at Dialed and Angling in the Rod Sheridan Productions office this week. Just filmed some videos. You might have seen it online with the new Maven. I had an unbelievable, awesome time drilling with that auger last year. I had about a week period where I got to play with that auger. And like I said in the video, and like I said at our studio when we filmed that little segment for Instagram and Facebook, I fell in love with it. It checks every single box that you would want if you're looking or in the market for a new auger. It's faster, it's lighter, it's stronger. It's amazing. It's basically 40-volt auger that you drill that's the same weight or close to the same weight as a 24-volt, and that thing rips. It was really hard for me to give up the Maven and go back to drilling holes, with 3 feet of ice that time of year with my other augers. I just wanted to drill with that Maven. So it's going to be one of the hottest selling products that hit the market this fall. And so you're going to want to check them out for yourselves. There's ice shows out there. I know a lot of retailers have specials on them. If you're out and about this weekend, maybe doing a little shopping for your upcoming hunting season, you're going to want to swing into the fishing department and check out that Maven auger from Strike Master. It is super cool. It's super light, and it will be your next auger. If you're looking for one right now, that auger's it. Trust me. So we're going to have more ice product conversation as we get into next week. Things are starting to shift to ice, and my mindset's starting to shift to ice, but I have a ton of hunting to do. I still have some open water experiences to do. I've been trying to track down Marcus Quam right now. He's promised me these giant walleyes. I'm hoping to do a podcast based on that yet this fall. So I've got a ton of fishing. We're sort of in the transition time period. Get your boats winterized. If you have any questions, reach out to Brian or Andrew up in Sauk Rapids at the Rapid Marine or any of the Rapid Marine dealers. They do a great job. They always help me out with stuff. Anytime I have questions on things, I love picking the brain of either Brian or Andrew up in Sauk Rapids. But I know all across that dealership family, there's a ton of good, talented people out there. So if you're looking to get your boat winterized, now's the time to do it. Maybe get out and take advantage of this beautiful weekend we have and get it done before deer season. Like I said, check that box, get it done. It's nice to get those honey-do lists done. It's nice to get the boats winterized and things put away so that next spring you're not experiencing some issues with your boat when you're really geeked up to get out fishing. So until next week, I'm Tony Roach. Good luck fishing. This has been the Dialed In Angling Podcast.